What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another powerful episode of Marketing by Design. I am your host, Andy Milligan of MMG Design, and today we have a very special guest for you, and that special guest is Monique Jenkins. Monique is a creative leader, agency owner, and branding expert. She's the founder and CEO of the Creative Circle Collective in Baltimore, Maryland, which is a bespoke design and branding agency that helps small businesses and nonprofits thrive online. Monique has a huge depth of experience working in UI, UX, all the way from small startups to big corporate companies. And her experience really shines through in this conversation. But don't let that throw you off, because she's actually not the most buttoned up and professional, which I personally love. In this episode, she's going to share with us the $1 million career mistake that completely changed her trajectory in her business forever. Her experience with meeting people at the top who just aren't impressive as they may seem online, and a few controversial takes on networking and how to market yourself as a designer and creative. And you're going to want to stay for these because you don't hear people vocalizing these things very often. Again, thank you guys for tuning in. You're not going to want to miss this one. Make sure you stick around to the end. And if you head to the first link in the description, you'll get on our mailing list for a quick 2-paragraph summary every Thursday with an email for the podcast announcement and some exciting updates that we are sharing as we build and grow. Again, without further ado, please welcome Monique Jenkins. Learn all about her in the description below. Let's dive on in. Keeping up with marketing trends and leveling up your career doesn't have to be overwhelming, so don't go at it alone. Welcome to the Marketing by Design podcast, powered by AMA Columbus. Join host Andy Milligan every Tuesday as you and I dive into the info that you need to know as a marketer. Whether your goal is to land a job, grow that network, make more money, or level up your career in marketing, you are in the right place. Come for the actionable info, stay for the pressing conversations with industry marketing leaders, and walk away the best equipped marketer ready to dominate your niche. I'm so excited to talk to you today. Let's go.
Business is going fine. It's in a little bit of a weird space though, because it's the end of the year, which means that we're not necessarily taking on new clients, but we're trying to push clients to the beginning of the start of the year. So that's been interesting. We're in the process of wrapping up a big client. They actually don't wrap until February, but I'd like to get this thing done sooner rather than later. They're hitting their 25-year anniversary, so we're redoing their website. That's exciting. And I think that's about it right now. I'm all about like, how do we acquire clients for the future? Like, that's my space. I'm like, okay, who wants to give me money now? That's where I am.
Yeah, that's what it's like that. I'm like seeing this so much because this is like my first full year of like freelance. It was February, so it wasn't technically a full year, but like just the roller coaster. We talked about it a little bit last time. Is how can you find the balance of, because if you can't say no right now during like when it's busy and overbooked, you like you have to commit to this. But like saying, can we get something on the calendar or work out some kind of a structure where it's a bit more dripped out is definitely top of mind for me. And I mean, do you have any advice on that?
I honestly don't know. I think it's exciting because when we started the business together, this is a mistake. I'll pivot this as a mistake. When we started the business together, one of the things that we didn't do is sit down and go over like a formal like founders agreement. Like, this is the hours you're responsible for working. This is what you're responsible for doing. These are like your goals. What happens if you don't hit your goals? How does, shares get split? All of that kind of like legal stuff that people don't really think about. It was just like, we're friends. Let's go into business together. Cool, let's do it. We're already doing this podcast together. Everything seems to be going fine. So exciting because I'm like, now I have full ownership over it and I get to like direct it in the ways that I want. Scary because I'm like, you have full ownership and now like the responsibility is on you. You have to make all this stuff happen by yourself, which is very like an interesting dichotomy to be in. So yes, kind of exciting, but kind of also like, Monique, how you get yourself into these positions?
Yeah, I say that like that line right there. I say that to myself probably several times a day. But I think that's a good thing because you don't want to be, because I have been on the other side of where like you're just scrounging for any possible opportunity and telling yourself that it is more than it is just so you can keep yourself going.
Yes.
So it is a good problem to have. You kind of have to assume the identity before you realize it yourself of someone that is making the most of opportunities and has a choice of things to choose from rather than picking from like a limited selection like that.
Yes.
But I want to get right into it. But why don't you like talk a little bit about your background? I know you're in Baltimore, right? Baltimore?
Yes.
Okay. I'm a Steelers fan. We just lost to the Ravens this week, so it's like a little sting. I don't want to.
You should have.
Yeah.
As you should have. The world is right. And you know what? They're giving out 10% discounts on the place that I just had lunch at because the Ravens won. The Steelers should have lost. My best friend in the world is a Steelers fan, and we like have this rivalry. We're texting each other every game, being like, "Your team's about to lose. Your team's about to lose." It's horrible. It's horrible. I don't know why I'm friends with that girl.
Well, this is going to be a great conversation then. So I want to talk about you and not the Steelers, but tell me your story, the TLDR, for the people listening.
So my name's Monique. I am the CEO and co-founder of Creative Circle Collective, which is a design agency that's based in Baltimore. I started designing it's coming on like 15 years at this point. So I started in traditional graphic design, and then after I made like $1 million mistake, I realized that I needed to pivot into UX design specifically. So the company I was working for was really big in graphic design and how design can enhance, what they're doing with their marketing and promotional campaigns. But we weren't really finding or doing any due diligence as far as like research and understanding our customer. So we made a lot of mistakes along the way. And that kind of pivoted me into UX and then got me down this path of like what design means overall for businesses and agencies and how those things kind of manifest and come together. And that got me to agency owner. I've worked for a bunch of big companies, some small companies, some startups that you probably never heard of that got shut down. But as I have expanded my career to kind of work in all these different subsets and areas, the thing that I realized for me at least is like all of this stuff is made up. Nobody knows what they're doing. I would rather make it up myself in my own thing.
Yeah. And that was a big topic of like the first time we talked, is like we're all just kind of failing our way forward. I think the people that can overcome that for themselves and then forge their own way, they end up, at the end of the day, you have something that ends up being real. And you just kind of have to go through that messy middle of learning from other people and then, failing in your own right. But you're a big inspiration for me on that front, so thank you. But what...
I'm failing hard right now. I'm failing at lots of things. Business partnership. Yeah. Oh, I ended up losing that contract for $6 million. So failed big at that. But, I learned stuff. So that's good too.
Dude, and that's so awesome. Like each failure is literally like each no is so much closer to the next yes. And you just have to like I had this moment recently where like you get rejected for podcast interview sponsorship and you have to take it as like I'm one closer. Like and you're just like yes, like oh yeah, grimacing my teeth bearing through it. And then that's what I seriously love that about you. And you're like smiling about it, sharing it openly.
Yeah. The thing is, I'm like, I got 90% there. I just need to figure out like what that last 10% is, and then I'm going to kill it like on the next one. But to your point of what you were just saying is I was reading an article or maybe listening to something, or maybe it was a meme, I can't even remember. And it was like, if you knew you were 28 no's from $1 billion like company or business or something like that, you would revel in the no. You'd be like, oh, I got like 27 more. Oh, I got like 26 more. Like if you knew that all the no's that you are currently getting amounts to this huge yes that changes your life forever, then you wouldn't be so fearful of those spaces. So I try not to be fearful of the no. I'm like, okay, it didn't work out. I learned something. Now we get to pivot and kind of move forward. And that's been my model and will continue to be so. I will fail at a million things, but I'm going to get one thing right.
Oh, dude, that's like such a big part of your brand. I love that so much. Yeah. But so switching to the tactical, like what have you learned kind of throughout your career, other than resilience and just relentless positivity, that in marketing, you started in graphic design, you moved more into UX and full-scale branding. What have you learned kind of in that transition? Does that teach you, which do you enjoy more? What's kind of your home run specialty?
Yeah. Well, before I was a designer, I was in marketing, technically. Undergrad, I thought I wanted to be in marketing. I did not. But what I realized...
It's a suffering. Yeah, you have to
Yes.
bear it a little bit.
No, thank you. But when I was taking a marketing course, what I realized is I actually didn't like marketing. I like the visual side of it. Like I like making the graphics that would be used to enhance people's marketing efforts, but I didn't necessarily love the idea of marketing. But what I've realized as I've kind of like grown and transitioned over these last 15 years is design and marketing are the same side of the coin. They literally have to go together. Design is about communicating your brand's like visual essence, and marketing amplifies that message. Like, so you can't have one without the other. They both need to go together in order for them to kind of like evolve to the thing that you are actually looking for. And I legitimately was just talking about this with one of our interns as we're making our like 2025 social media marketing goals, which you made me do. I was like, you know what? Andy is out here posting every day. I could do it. I promise you, I can make it happen. Probably can't. But
well, I'm about to rock your world because I don't have a plan myself. So thank you.
That's good. I'm one up on you right now, but I'm gonna lose ultimately. But right this second, I'm in a good space.
Yeah, you're gonna catch me for sure. I can't keep up with Monique's pace. So.
Look, I can't keep up with Monique either. But one of the things that she asked me, and like, what do you want to convey through like social media marketing specifically? And I was like, for Instagram specifically, I think that we need to leverage Instagram to tell the story of our business. So I love design. I think it's beautiful. I love the fact that we own this design agency, but design is design is design. Like my agency is no different than the next agency, which is no different than the next one. Where we're going to capture people is in the essence of like who we are, because every single time we sign a client, they become like a part of our story and we become a part of theirs. So for me, the marketing of that is really storytelling. How do we tell the story of our brand in a way that makes it relatable enough to someone that they feel impelled to like come to our company and want us to be a part of their journey and their story, which I think is really important. So for me, marketing is much more about storytelling and community than it is about like trying to sell you something. The people who naturally gravitate towards our agency, I think, are impressed by how many stories we are able to articulate on our relative platforms, more so than our ability to like hammer them down with like sales or the numbers or anything like that. So that's for me, design and marketing are the same thing in some respects. They just like tackle it a little bit differently. And when I worked in a corporate environment, it always felt like those two departments were ahead with each other. Like they didn't really invest together in the way that they needed to. Like we had marketing designers who did marketing stuff, and then we had UX designers who were on the other side. But like we're really telling the same story from two different perspectives. And when those two divisions don't come together properly, then you don't sell a good story to your customer.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's why I had the same experience in the agency role too. It's where you have marketing graphic designers, you have apparel designers, you have print designers, and it's like all of them get along well, but then when you start to talk to the people that are more on the other side where they're the one pushing it out, they're the ones that are scheduling the campaigns, like the managers and directors. There's a bit of a conversational disconnect, and that's why like there's a big value in having people converse in all those different sides of it is marketing. But because I was like literally what you said, the exact same way. I started in marketing. I have a marketing minor at university, and we had the opportunity to do a branding project just for a student organization. And I was like yes, this is not all numbers. It's a lot more tangible. It's a lot more hands-on. And it really identified with that creative side of it. That's what got me into it. And then you start to see how it is actually the same thing, like you said. And do you have any like first story like that, or first thing that kind of got you into the creative side that, you know, sent you down this lovely rabbit hole that we're both trying to get out?
Yes. So I'll go way back. Junior Monique. Junior Jenkins is what I like to call her. When I was a kid, Facebook was like a thing, or no, it was MySpace at the time. MySpace was a thing. I would like design the like headers for MySpace for all my family and friends. So, but I didn't think about that as a viable career path. Like I 100% thought I was going to be a lawyer. Like I was like, I like to argue. I like to be right. I like to challenge other people. Like this is probably the best use of my skill set. And I've probably been saying I'm going to be a lawyer since I was 1 year old up until the time that I was like 20 maybe. So my degree was very curious because I was like, oh, I'm gonna do comms and then I'll go into like a law program later. But when I was in the midst of getting my degree, I actually got a job at AOL. At the time, it was advertising.com, is like one of their subsidiaries. And my responsibility in this internship, I was a publishing intern, was to go through all of the websites that needed ads placed on them and categorize them into tiers. So tier A was like Disney, and tier D was like what you think of when you think of a tier D website. So like a no-name mom blog, kind of like no one's ever heard of this thing. So Disney would get all the like ads for maybe like a Nike or something like that. And then the mom blogs that were in a tier D would get like little ads from businesses that maybe you don't know. And that was my responsibility all day, 8 hours a day for 3 years, was just to run through these websites and classify them into relative tiers. And I go to the marketing meetings and I'd sit in with all the execs and they'd be talking about like, I remember like we were doing something for like the Macy's Day Parade or something. And they were like, oh, our advertising budget is, $5 million. We need to push out these ads. We need to get people to buy. We need to da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, that's so much money for what? Like, I don't get it. Like, how are we making the leap? But what I really enjoyed about the job was like analyzing websites. Like that was my responsibility all day. It's just analyze websites over and over and over again. And I was like, I like the design of things, or I like, how people are showcasing or telling their stories. I don't necessarily like or care about the marketing side of things. That's how that interjection happened for me, is that I just was sitting there for so long looking at websites that I was like, I could design something better than this. And then when I graduated, I was like, okay, I know I don't want to be a lawyer anymore. I want to go into design. What does that look like? And I went and got my master's, and then I started there. But when I went into my master's program, I had never opened a design software, like at all. Not even, I've never even heard of Adobe. I didn't even know what that was. I just jumped into the program and I was like, I'm going to learn as much as I can. And then I'm going to pivot and like do whatever I got to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. And like, that's, the foundation of that comes from how you, having seen so much and like really known the small nuances and details just of websites in general and best practices. A lot of people that are, especially nowadays, come from web, that are identified as web designers, start from a creative background. And I think that's kind of the shift of the industry, where you have like a lower barrier of entry to people who are design. You didn't have to know code. You didn't have to do anything. So you can really go to just publishing your website, basically designing it in Figma, and then using a software that can transmit that design. You don't have to have a ton of code base or best practices, but what you skip over is UX and what's actually important for conversion and kind of the psychology pieces, and also just like the marketing piece behind it is like, this is talking to the person that I want to talk to. You don't want a bespoke branded website that's super colorful and interactive like you would see on a design portfolio. You don't want that transmitted to, a healthcare system, like a healthcare brand that's targeting 80 to 90-year-olds with Medicare. Like, you have to have best practices and just know like who you're talking to.
Yeah. And
so
I'll
I
say,
think
like,
you have those foundations in place.
I remember not even caring about like who the website was for. Like as a just traditional graphic designer, I was like, I'm just making what I like. Like that was my thing. Like I remember making Pinterest boards and I'd be like, I don't know, energy website. And then I'd like download a bunch of pens and I'm like, okay, I like this element. I like this. I'm going to recreate this. I'm going to do this. But like, I truly had no sense of like who this site was going to go to or what those metrics and things like that were. But specifically at my organization, design and marketing did not speak to each other. Like we just didn't, like, it just wasn't even a thing. Like they were close enough to us. Like we talked conversationally about life, but like never about the core product offering that we were actually trying to sell until that $1 million mistake where like we came in, we left on a Friday, sent out a promotional offer, came in on Monday and we're like, we lost $3 million. What happened? And our CEO was like, Monique did it. Monique, it's her fault. She used red instead of blue. I told her to not use that color and she didn't listen. And I'm like, oh, well, if I'm going to take accountability for this thing, then I also have to figure out what happened. So then that's when I started to like research. I'm like, okay, so design isn't enough. Aesthetics aren't enough. That's not what's going to drive people. What is going to drive them? And then that's when I started talking to marketing and customer service and then hearing like, oh, well, some of the reasons why we've heard that customers aren't converting is because when you design the landing page, you use light colors or very nice, core colors that like all went into your color palette. palette, but they couldn't, there was no accent color that they could discern was something actionable that they could do. Okay, cool. All right. So like the beige top with the beige button didn't necessarily make sense to someone. Or once I started looking at heat maps, I'm like, okay, people are clicking on images that don't do anything. So like, what are they trying to do? What exactly are they looking for? Like that information I never got in the design space. It was very much like, what does Monique like? And how can she like relay that to get her manager to like it? And then that's how we kind of move forward. So it was like, what do I like? What do they like? Let's push forward with that. It was never like, what does the customer actually need in order to feel secure about purchasing said item or service or whatever the case is. And then when that thing switched in my brain, I was like, okay, well, I'll never be accountable for like ineffective design again. And ineffective design to me is if it doesn't make sense for the core audience that I'm marketing to, if it's not accessible, we're not going to do that. If it's not this, just whatever those principles are, I just was like, I abide by these laws on every single project, every single design, they're going to have these. What is that and how does that communicate from a marketing perspective? Am I tapping into the right person, segment, customer, whatever the case is? And if I'm not, what's the information that I need to go figure out in order to be doing this better?
Yeah, you kind of reverse engineer the process because you start, especially designers and creatives, you start as, and by the way, that's an awesome story too. And I would have said too is like, okay, if this $3 million stake was all my fault, then I must be pretty valuable to this team then if I have that much power.
Let me tell you, the $40,000 said otherwise that I was making. I was not valuable to that team at all. It's just that it was such a small company that like they needed accountability to be laid somewhere. Why not with Monique? Because she made it and she pushed it out the door. But touche, I get it.
Yeah, pointing fingers, yeah. But that's the thing too is that like I think sometimes marketing directors are, and this isn't a generalization, but they're just looking for something to hit and push post. And I think where designers and creatives can set themselves apart, and especially in a marketing environment, is really justifying the ROI, leading with the things you talk about, tying it back to the customer and the main objective, and saying like why it accomplishes it with why does the color, the typography, the brand, why does it accomplish the goals that the bigger campaign is setting out to accomplish.
And that,
so you really have to fight.
Whole thing for me is like it can no longer be Monique's fault because this is what the customer said they wanted. Like I didn't pick this typeface because I like it. I picked it because the customer likes it because they think that it relays a sense of stability. Whatever. We picked blue because blue is a strong color. It represents safety and like it can't be Monique did it because we are using, color psychology that has been done a million times over. So like it can't be my fault specific. This is all to lay blame on somebody else. This is why my whole design career started. I could be like, it isn't me. It is the customer. So if it sinks or it fails or whatever the case is, that responsibility is no longer on me. It is a group effort, and we all failed this project together.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's when I think you graduate as a creative. Is like you stop designing for yourself and you start designing for other people, and then it's almost like a part of you dies, and then but the new part of you is born when you see how it benefits other people, and you start to see it work beyond yourself. And branching off that, I want to ask you the $1 million question is, how does design actually make companies money? What's the A to B there? Very broad question, but you got this.
Let me see. I think that design helps make companies money because design tells the story of your brand across entities. So one of the things that I think design is really effective at is making sure that your core customer knows who you are regardless of environment that you live in. So one of the big contributions, and I legitimately was just talking about this with Nike, is like one of the ways that Nike is really effective with their design principles is that the designs themselves, they never really like sell you on the shoes. Like they're not like, oh, go buy these Air Maxes, they're so great. What they sell you on is this idea of like heroism in their organization or throughout their marketing campaigns. They're driving an emotion. So like for me, that is the correlation of design is like they are using effective design principles in order to relay emotion so that you feel enticed to commit to an action, because emotionality is always going to win over like aesthetics all day, every day. Like people want to buy into an idea or a concept inside of a structure more so than they do like the item itself. Like sneakers are sneakers, just like a design agency is a design agency. You're buying into like the story that organization is telling. So I think that design helps to make organizations money because it helps to enhance and congeal like all of these concepts overall. But then I also think that it helps to drive, their mission forward in the ways that they are effectively showcasing their product or service or offering or whatever the case is.
Yeah, well, it's the whole concept. It's putting visuals, which is the most powerful form of communication, to the practicality of what the marketing foundation is. It's like,
Yes.
so you have your customer demographics, you have all these things like the psychology of color, like that's all the data. Now, how do we represent that in a way that actually gets people in the door? It's literally the hook. And I think until you have that checkbox like down in place, like you really have it nailed, then it's not only does it like amplify the existing message, I think, but it also like makes it more clear. And I 100% with Nike. There's a ton of examples. Like Steve Jobs has a ton of quotes about like how he tried to emulate Apple's message around Nike. They said they never use direct calls to action. They want to embody world-class athletes. They never make direct calls to action for buying our shoes.
Yeah.
They let their products and their athletes just do the talking, and then the conversion from that is people want to associate with it. They're inspired, and so much of that has to do with design and brand consistency. It's just consistency across multiple touch points. Like your website has to be the same as your brand identity, same typography, same mood, same feel. Especially like when you're translating, you have to have so many different touch points in the customer journey now being seen in different places, and things like brand voice and the words you're using, the copy. It's so hard to keep that uniform when all these different methods of expressing it are different. So it takes a really skillful eye to just not know the importance of it, but also recognize it and know how to communicate it and use design as the lead for it.
Yeah, and like I think there's a research study that says like effective design principles help to outperform companies that don't care about design by like 50%. Like if you are not designing your website, your brand, your whatever the case is, in an effective way, you are losing money because people can't make the correlations and they're not going to try to. If it takes, I don't know, what is that, like the average right now is like if a website doesn't load in 3 seconds, like people leave. If it takes them 3 seconds to want to be a part of your service or space and it takes your website 10 seconds to load, or you've inefficiently like built this thing, then you lose money every single time. If people can't find your CTAs, you lose money. If people can't trust your brand based on what they see, the visual representation of it, then you lose money. So it just makes sense to like input effective design principles, and that looks way different for a lot of different companies. Like I always tell my students, I was like, when you think of Wikipedia, you don't think of like the best design site in the world, but it's effective because the function of the site actually works. It doesn't matter that the design isn't as pretty as I would probably want it to be. It does function in the use that it has. So investing in good design and good UX principles is just going to make you money.
Yeah, it's gas on the fire. So it is.
Yes.
And I made the same analogy with things like Amazon and like booking vacation rental booking sites. It's like, man, like I get it, and it's like I get it, but that's the most important thing, and I have to like appreciate it. It's kind of like when you it's probably like when you see your kid go through a breakup. Not that I can make that analogy. I'm like, I'm heartbroken for you, but you have to be like this. It can't be any other way.
Yep.
But yeah, that's the analogy I would make. But you kind of like landing the plane here have done a very good job of building your personal brand. I believe so. And I want to know, like, because there's a lot of younger kind of marketers, people that are trying to build their own career brand-wise. And I think you have done a very good job of associating with organizations, getting on platforms where you have a unique voice and can speak to your credibility. And you're also a very well-spoken, confident person. You give that impression. I'm trying to hype you up here. But how do you, like, what's your approach to kind of networking, building your own personal brand as a business owner? And what would you recommend, the kind of the TLDR to someone who's trying to do that for themselves?
So I will say, if you are new in this space, when I was new to design, let me tell y'all first. I don't like people, okay? I don't like talking to people. I just like being by myself. But what I will say is when I didn't like that, it was probably right out of college. I didn't really want to like do the networking and all that. I just can't. I don't want to. And I still don't some days. But one of the things that I forced myself to do was to join a not-for-profit, and they were called AIGA Baltimore. It's like I never can think of this acronym, and it's really sad because I was on the board for like 6 years, but it's like the Association of Graphic Artists. That feels right.
Yeah, that sounds about right. There's an institute, maybe Association Institute of Graphic Artists.
It's something. Google it, guys. Yeah. It's on there. I promise you.
Okay, moving on. Yes.
I forced myself into that environment because I knew that I did not like to talk to people. My husband is like the most outgoing person that you have ever met in your entire life. It's the most annoying thing that I have ever been a part of. Like he literally got into a 4-hour conversation with the woman who we were buying our couch from, telling her all about his motorcycle accident. He brought up pictures of him in the hospital. It was just like a whole thing. And I don't want to be a part of that. But one of the things of being in a relationship with that person taught me is that how valuable community and connection really is. My husband could literally talk himself into whatever room or space. I've seen him walk into a conference that I haven't had to pay like $2,000 for freely, end up backstage for some reason, and just be like all over the place. And if you ask any person who knows me and him, they will tell you he makes more connections at conferences than we do, and we purchased the ticket. My husband is just a natural butterfly when it comes to engaging with people, and I am not. So I joined AIGA to force myself out of my comfort zone, and I stayed in that space for 6 years, and then specifically coordinating events. So I had to talk to speakers who were, high profile and made hundreds of thousands of dollars and like did a bunch of awesome stuff. And I am like a lowly person who just probably did an internship and didn't do anything else. Figuring out how to structure those conversations, how to talk to people, how to talk in those worlds really helped me as I started to cater to my business. So I knew for sure that like I needed a sense of community because I had been a part of one, and I knew what it took to like engage with people in a way that I wasn't naturally comfortable in doing. So I really forced myself out of my comfort zone for a very long time. And then even when I left AIGA Baltimore, I started another non-for-profit, or not started, but took on another non-for-profit called Ladies Wine and Design Baltimore, and they're a national non-for-profit just like AIGA is. And in that, it was just me and one other person who was running that chapter. Again, I forced myself out of my comfort zone to get to know people, reach out to speakers haphazardly, ask them if they're interested in being on a podcast or if they're interested in doing, an event or something like that, when I did not know these people and really didn't know anything outside of them besides what I Googled and found out in 10 minutes before I sent them an email. Like I did not know anything. So I encourage people to get out of their comfort zone and to go into as many networking events as humanly possible. I know that it is awkward. It is supposed to be for some time, but you have to get yourself out of there and you will start to find community in those spaces. So like AIG might not have been like the perfect space for me, but the network, the connections that I made led to the $6 million deal that I was talking about. Like I met those people at AIGA 8 years ago, and now that manifested into something else. So I think that like networking is so incredibly important. Finding your people is so incredibly important, and it's so undervalued. As a business owner, I'm going to get way more bang for my buck going to a small networking event and talking to a couple people. I might be able to sign like 1 or 2 clients than I am from sending out cold emails to a bunch of companies that I don't know, I've never talked to before, don't know me, anything like that.